The Clone Wars wasn't won by lightsabers alone. Massive warships entered planets, starfighters tore through space, and some ships became so feared that just arriving in your system could change the outcome of an entire battle. From Republic cruisers to Separatist dreadnoughts, these are some ships that dominated the Clone Wars. Starting out with the legendary Venator-class Star Destroyer, standing nearly 3,730 feet long, this wasn't your ordinary ship. Designed by Lyra Wessex, this was the first class of Star Destroyer to be manufactured by the quaint Drive Yards. Whether it was transporting troops across the galaxy or leading fleets directly into battle, this ship could do pretty much anything you asked of it. Its iconic wedge-shaped design was so inspiring that we'd even see the Imperial Star Destroyers follow with the same exact shape. But during the Clone Wars, the Venator was everywhere. Equipped with heavy turbo laser turrets, dual laser cannons, torpedo launchers, plenty of deck guns, and strong shields that allowed it to survive intense battles, the Republic wasn't playing around when sending their Venators into battle. But what truly made the Venator dangerous was how versatile it was. This ship was able to carry entire squadrons of starfighters, Republic gunships, ATTE walkers, tanks, and thousands upon thousands of clone troopers at once. One moment it could be launching Republic gunships onto a planet, and the next it could be deploying troops directly onto the battlefield. Some Venators even served directly under Jedi generals, marked by their distinct red color of the bridge that we can see throughout the Clone Wars and even in Revenge of the Sith. Most notably with Anakin Skywalker's the Resolute. And honestly, imagine being a Separatist commander mid-battle and subtly seeing a Jedi-led Venator like the Resolute just drop out of hyperspace. Knowing Anakin is aboard that ship, probably with Ahsoka and Obi-Wan Kenobi, you know that your odds of winning are next to none, and you're most likely going to have to retreat. That alone could completely shift, and probably will shift, the momentum of a fight. From Christophsis to Coruscant, the Venator became one of the defining symbols of the Clone Wars, and a fan-favorite ship in all of Star Wars. But while the Republic might have relied heavily on their Venators, they also needed starfighters that could survive intense combat against endless waves of droid fighters, and that brings us to another fan-favorite vehicle with the ARC-170. Introduced shortly after the Clone Wars began, the ARC-170 was designed for aggressive combat missions. Equipped with powerful laser cannons, proton torpedoes, and rear defense weaponry, this fighter packs serious firepower. Like many ships in Star Wars, this also required tons of teamwork. It was able to hold one pilot, one co-pilot, a tail gunner, and an astromech droid, making the ship have small but very versatile crews. The Republic needed something that could counter starfighters like the Separatist Vulture droids, and the ARC-170 proved to be extremely efficient with that. In fact, it became so successful that they slowly began replacing the V-19 Torrent with the ARC-170 in many fleets. The ARC-170 appeared in several major battles throughout the Clone Wars, but what might be just the most impressive feat of it all is how they actually guarded a BTL-B Y-Wing starfighter that was armed with the experimental electro-proton bomb. Also seen in the Battle of Kamino and the Battle of Sullust, these things were everywhere. But the firepower wasn't the only thing that made this ship stand out. It felt durable and it was dangerous. This wasn't a sleek interceptor build that was just for speed. It was designed in order to survive brutal dogfights against your Separatist fleets and the Vulture droids. The best comparison I can have to this ship is with an X-Wing. But while one could say the ARC-170 was extremely versatile, it still struggled against overwhelming numbers of Separatist fleet, and that's where the Vulture droids came in. Also known as the Vulture-class starfighter or variable geometry self-propelled battle droid Mark I, it's best known to fans as the Vulture droid. It became one of the most recognizable Separatist ships of the Clone Wars. Unlike Republic starfighters, they didn't require a single pilot. They were completely unmanned. But while just dealing with one of these might not be the scariest, they were normally sent out in clusters. They were incredibly agile, and they were able to make extreme maneuvers that most other ships couldn't. Able to hit extreme speeds and make crazy turns, Republic pilots were in for a headache when dealing with them. A cool feature is the ability to communicate with each other through rapid chatter, and even transform into walking form when patrolling planetary surfaces when they were needed. They didn't have the heaviest of firepower, as they were only armed with twin blaster cannons and energy torpedoes, and while the Vulture droid did pose a threat, they did have upgraded variants that became even more dangerous by replacing the torpedo launchers with buzz droid missiles capable of tearing enemy ships apart. While they might have not been the most durable thing ever, they made up for it with their relentless pressure and overwhelming forces. Dealing with these could turn any ordinary battle into complete chaos. But the Separatists couldn't rely on something that was just for the offensive. They needed something larger that can do both, and enter the Providence-class dreadnought. Designed by Quarren engineers, this was one of the deadliest capital ships fielded by the Confederacy during the Clone Wars. It cost a ton of credits. To be exact, over 400 million credits in order to buy this. This ship was strictly built for large-scale warfare. Going on the offensive or defensive, you name it, it had you covered. The firepower on board was almost unmatched. It carried quad heavy turbo lasers, heavy laser cannons, ion cannons, flak cannons, proton torpedo launchers, a tractor beam. This thing was armed for nearly any scenario you could throw at it, whether it was dealing with a Venator, Arc 170s, gunships. It wasn't messing around. But very similar to the Venator, it wasn't only about weapons. This also could provide as a transport, as it could carry numerous starfighters and vehicles, including the Vulture droid, tri-fighters, tanks, transports, and other shuttles if necessary. This ship was huge, and it required a large crew of over 900 to be able to control this. There's many different variants of the Providence-class dreadnought, with probably the most famous one being the Invisible Hand, General Grievous's flagship during Revenge of the Sith, but fans might also remember ships like the Invincible and the Invulnerable, commanded by Admiral Trench during several major battles. The Republic had the Venator, the Separatists had the Providence. And while the Providence is one of the larger ships for the Separatists, it's small compared to our next ship, which is the Lucrehulk class battleship. It was absolutely massive. Originally, it was designed as a cargo transport vessel for the Trade Federation, and later on these ships were illegally modified into heavily armed battleships and blockade ships once the Clone Wars began. The Lucrehulk became one of the most important Separatist vessels in the entire galaxy. It had massive amounts of weapons, equipped with dozens of quad turbo lasers, and capable of carrying enormous number of droid starfighters, tanks, troop, transports, and battle droids. These ships could function almost like mobile military bases. And forget about the weapons, the size of it alone was more than enough intimidation that you needed. One of these arriving over a planet immediately changes the situation. You couldn't just fly around it, the only way of passing it was going through it. While there were some flaws with the weapons as they didn't have them all the way around the vehicle, it was still more than enough firepower to deal with a lot of oncoming enemy attacks. And even with some areas not having as much firepower, they could deploy some ships and have them just sit and camp in the areas that aren't as protected. Just like with the Providence-class dreadnought, this symbolized power, but on a completely different scale. And while we know the Separatists love to inject fear into their opponents, another fear-inspired ship is with the Malevolence. The Subjugator-class heavy cruiser served as another one of General Grievous's flagships, and quickly became one of the most feared ships in the entire war. The crew was over 23,000 battle droids large, and it wasn't just your ordinary ship, it was more of a super weapon. It had 16 sublight engines and massive ion cannons that could disable entire Republic fleets in one attack. Once enemy ships lost power, they became easy targets with its enormous arsenal of turbo lasers and heavy weapons. It was learned pretty early on in the war for the Republic forces that once the ship arrived, survival wasn't a guarantee. One of the more devastating attacks came during its assault on a Republic medical station following the Battle of Arbrigado. Emerging from hyperspace, and it began tearing through defenseless medical frigates one after another in a pretty dark moment in the Clone Wars. Anakin Skywalker so happened to be on the other side, thankfully, and that was more than enough to stop the Malevolence in its way. After a rather interesting battle on both sides, with many forces lost, the Malevolence did have to retreat, but it was at the cost of tons of Republic troops. Most things tied to General Grievous are seen as iconic, and his ship is just another one that fans can't get enough of, And another ship fans can't get enough of is with the Low Altitude Assault Transport, better known as the Republic gunship. Out of all the vehicles listed, this is one of the cheaper ones, right around 85,000 credits per gunship. So it was easier to mass produce rather than, let's say, a Venator, obviously. These were used for transports, deployments, and could even be injected right into battle. But despite being cheaper, the gunship became one of the most important vehicles in the entire Clone Wars. Its first appearance was during the Battle of Geonosis. These ships immediately proved how valuable they were by rescuing Jedi trapped inside the arena while deploying clone troopers directly into combat. Armed with powerful laser cannons, missile launchers, and defense turrets, these gunships could rapidly switch between transport and attack on a whim. One moment they were dropping clones and Jedi onto the battlefield, and the next they were flying directly into combat providing support fire. Their versatility made them essential throughout the entire war. And unlike many Clone Wars vehicles that disappeared after the Republic fell, once the Empire took charge, they actually continued to use the gunships for years afterward in the gray color scheme we see in shows like Maul Shadow Lord and even the Bad Batch. That alone should tell you how effective these were that even the Empire wanted to use them. And even years later, these ships still remain some of the most iconic designs in all of Star Wars, and fans always want to see them in new media. Whether it was Venators leading Republic fleets into battle, gunships deploying or rescuing troops, Separatist dreadnoughts overwhelming entire systems, the Clone Wars had some of the best moments in all of Star Wars with some of the best ships ever. So, if you had to choose one ship that truly dominated the Clone Wars, which would it be? What ships did I not mention that you were a huge fan of? Let me know all of that in the comments down below. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed, use the Force on that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.